And you have a chance now to say yes or no. I hope you will say yes.
The option of leaving the meeting is there.
Okay. I'm beginning with the presentation of our guest. The conversation has the title Subversive Dramaturgies. And I have to say that this is inspired by the title of the book authored by Jozefina Komporaly, Plays from Romania, Dramaturgies of Subversion. Jozefina is a translator and academic based at the School of Performance, University of the Arts in London. She is editor and co-translator of the drama collections How to Explain the History of Communists to Mental Patients and Other Plays, published in 2015 by Siegel. Also Andras Višky's Barak Dramaturgy, published in 2017 by Intellect. And this more recent book, Plays from Romania, Dramaturgies of Subversion, Bloomsbury 2021. She also is the author of numerous publications on translation. She is a theoretician of translation, adaptation, and theater, including Radical Revival as Adaptation, published by Palgrave in 2017. She is a member of International Federation of Theatre Research and the UK Translators Association, and you can find more about her on her personal website. Our colleague Ilinca Tamara Todoruț, whom I know for many years, we met in New York when she was studying at Yale School of Drama. She now teaches at the Faculty of Theatre and Film within Babeș-Bolyai University in Romania. She earned her doctorate from Yale School of Drama and published articles in journals such as Theatre, Journal of Poverty, European Stages, and Theatre History Studies. She contributed to the Routledge Companion to Dramaturgy, published in 2015, and she authored last year Christoph Schlingensief's Realist Theatre. Ilinca, you have to help me with the pronunciation of this very difficult name of a very difficult artist. Realist Theatre, published by Routledge in 2022. So here is the presentation of our special guests tonight. I'm really happy you managed to have some time for this conversation about subversive dramaturgies, which includes, of course, dramaturgies in theater, but also narratives from other fields, because we all know that artists can and often are subversive, often are insurgents, and they can modify the realities, or at least attempt to modify the realities around them. We will host the conversation, both me and my colleague Miruna Runcan, co-director of Janovics Center for Screen and Performing Arts Studies. Under the umbrella of this center, we are opening up this conversation. And of course, we will open up the conversation to other participants in order for them to ask questions at the end of the night. But I would ask you first to say a few words, each of you, about your books, because these are recent books, important books, which are adding to a conversation about the role of the artist in the society. And you are giving some answers by these books. So maybe we should start by talking a little bit about each of them. Jozefina, can you start, please?
Sure. Thank you so much for the invitation, Cristina and Miruna. I'm really pleased to be here. And maybe I should quickly say that I was a student very briefly at your university. Gosh, almost 30 years ago. I was one of the first graduates of the MA in British Cultural Studies that just started there in the early 90s. Wow. So yeah, that's just a lovely connection that I felt I should share with you. So regarding the book, and thank you so much, of course, for referring to the title and referencing the title. I should just say from the off that this is, so the book that we are discussing is a drama collection, of course. It's a collection of Romanian drama translated into English. And it arises from my own translation practice. So that was really important for me to sort of stem from there. But it is combined, of course, with my academic research. And as Cristina pointed out, I have written about theatre over the years and have written about Romanian theatre in a few situations, most recently in the, what's it called, Routledge Companion to European Theatre and Performance. So these two interests sort of meet quite regularly in my career, and I'm hoping to continue this sort of juxtaposition in the future. The third element that I should perhaps credit here is how this book is a result of the pandemic, actually. I've been working on theatre translations for 10 years or so now, and that was a moment when I could take a break, almost pause for a moment, and bring the different elements together into what to me at the time seemed like a coherent whole. And a lot of the plays included in the book have been workshopped and tested, if you like, by way of rehearsed readings with a London-based international theatre company called Foreign Affairs, with whom I've been collaborating for a number of years. So that was the time when, as you probably recall, we were all sort of stuck in our respective homes, staring at the screen 24/7, trying to reach out to others, trying to collaborate in some way. And our mode of communication was to read and discuss plays in various modes. With the involvement of theatre practitioners based internationally, we were able to read some of my draft translations and sort of progress them and get them to a shape that arguably is now presentable to an international audience. So this is a kind of preamble. The overall aim, of course, was to put Romanian drama on the map, if you like. And I wouldn't like to say that this is the first publication on Romanian theatre ever in English, but it's one of the few. There aren't all that many collections where dramatic text can be found. But I'd like to credit those few that do exist, and maybe just to tell you in what way this is different. So, there are pioneering works published in the late 90s and early noughties, such as Playwrights Before the Fall, brought out by the Martin E. Segal Center in New York, or Eastern Promise, edited by Cheryl Robson for Aurora Metro Books, and more recently East of Eden, edited by Andrei Marinescu. And all of these are interesting in the sense that they stem from a particular cultural context. One is more sort of American focused, Eastern Promise, of course, is British focused, and East of Eden is a collection of Irish adaptations of Romanian plays. So we seem to have covered sort of the different segments of the English-speaking world in that way. But what I'd also say about these, apart from the fact that they were published some time ago, they carve out a space for Romanian drama alongside other works from Eastern Europe. So if you like, there is a token representative Romanian play alongside other Eastern European ones. And the sort of term Eastern is also credited in the title. So we are still dealing with the legacy of the Iron Curtain, the other side. And that's an important moment, I suppose, in theatre history. Now, with me, I very much wanted a collection to deal with work stemming from Romania only, and not other countries as well, and was really actively looking for a platform where to showcase this. And I sort of spotted an opportunity, having seen collections of drama hailing from different European countries, originally published by Oberon, who brought out collections of contemporary French, Greek, Spanish, Norwegian, Irish, etc. plays. And my original proposal was aiming to target that. But in the meantime, and successfully perhaps, and hopefully for us, Oberon was actually bought up by Bloomsbury, and they became part of this much larger international publishing platform where drama anthologies have been integrated, if you like, to broader preoccupations in drama and performance studies. So by the time I proposed my book, we were looking at Bloomsbury's drama and performance studies series. And I'm saying this because I think this is important in terms of positioning the work, not just as a one-off publication that no doubt well-meaning publisher puts out there, but it is part of a concerted effort. It's part of a series that I suppose is clocked, it's watched, it's purchased, it's stored in library collections in that way.
We will talk about more because about this aspect and context more, because it's very important, of course, where in what publishing house our work has echoes internationally. But first I want Ilinca, Tamara, Todoruț to introduce a little bit her book and say a few words about it.
Sure. Thank you for the nice introduction, Cristina. And so this very hard to pronounce name, Christoph Schlingensief. So my book on him. First of all, who he is. He started off as a filmmaker around the cusp of the German reunification, so around '89. He started off with making these films that were art house, kitschy films that other new German filmmakers walked out on, and they were like, what is this? And then he was invited to stage plays after that, so that he branched into theater, but he was extremely prolific. So in his relatively short life, because he died of cancer, after film, he branched into theater. Then he started doing TV things. He was a TV host for a little while where he took live naps on TV and things like that. He did street actions. He went to do the fine art in the museums with all sorts of exhibition. He went around the world and did happenings or actions. So he did everything artistic today. And that's why for me, this was intriguing. First, because he was really struck. This was a pretext for me to really think about what can art do today in terms of being subversive, or what is the point of art today? Because these are really the questions that he was really struggling, and he tried different forms and different things. So he kept really trying. And also, Germany and Romania. I mean, I had a personal connection between after '89 when his career started. He notoriously said that I'm not a political artist, I'm not interested in politics, but I'm just like forced by the world around me to like react somehow. So he really struggles with all of these things. He struggles openly with a lot of humor and a lot of maybe crassness, a lot of daring and a lot of questionable things. So he is highly spectacular, very dubious sometimes. He's a mess, and it makes like a wonderful subject to talk about, to discuss all these like what is subversive today in this particular world context.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fascinating subject because, of course, no matter in what kind of regime we live, it's either I don't know, a democracy or a totalitarian regime or even a dictatorship. What is the role of artists? Is this repeating itself? I mean, is this role supposed to be that of an insurgent, someone who is undermining the power, the authority? And it's very important to discuss this because sometimes artists, they don't even know how much power they have, how much their image, their capital of visibility in a society, it's worth. And maybe we should talk about that because you wrote about artists that are powerful in this sense.
Yes, but what was also interesting for me is that there was this, under a dictatorship, the oppositional role is very clear, right? Or like Sartre said that during the occupation, we were never freer than then. Like you knew what were you opposing, but what Schlingensief is dealing with, like there's this. Today, that paradigm is different. If you don't live in a dictatorship now, if you live in this diffused kind of structures and power regimes, what do you oppose? How do you oppose? How do you, like, what? Because just the so Schlingensief is not just about the content, and this is the tradition of Brechtian tradition, where being subversive or oppositional is not just like putting it in a content, like saying something subversive or like down with this or like this is bad. Brecht said something notoriously like you can like write a really rah-rah play, but stage it in the same way in the same institution, and the theater is going to theater down. Someone's going to neutralize any sort of potentially radical message you have if you don't know how to stage it radically. I was really interested in this too, with Schlingensief, that how this opposition takes form, not just in terms of content or message, but also institutional resistance, aesthetic resistance, talking about forms, production modes. So he experimented with all of these things.
We'll come back to him. It's obviously a fascinating figure. And I want to go back to Jozefina because she selected more artists who are in their own way and very different ways subversive. Well, some are more subtle, some are more direct, even very direct, like one of them. So how did you choose these artists, Jozefina? Why them and not others?
Indeed, that's the eternal question. I just wanted to sort of come in earlier a little bit, but it's perfect that I can sort of weave that point back, responding to your question. Well, the sort of span of the book, of course, is 30 plus 40 years or so. So we've got a text in the book by Matei Vișniec, The Spectator Condemned to Death, which is a play dating back from prior to the fall of communism. That's one of the few texts in the book, actually, that's, if you like, that old. The majority is post-1990. So that comes from the time when Vișniec himself was a banned author in Romania, when he sort of starts his kind of a project of resistance through culture, cultural resistance, and then, of course, leads to his departure to France, where his theatre career really takes on and his works get published. So I just wanted to sort of position that element is there kind of chronologically. The other major figure, of course, who can be situated back in the 80s in this vein is Herta Müller, who, of course, is not present directly because Herta Müller is not a playwright as such. We have an adaptation of a Herta Müller text in the book, but it's really important that the source text to that, Ținuturile Joase, Niederungen, translated as Lowlands, is early 80s. Again, a text that had problems with censorship back in the day, and it took years, if not decades, to be fully published in Romania after it had an international circulation. So just wanted to kind of stress that. But in terms of the selection and in terms of the concept of the book, what I wanted in this context of, if you like, decolonial approaches to theatre studies, I wanted a transnational volume of theatre to deal with what's happening in Romanian theatre circles. As we know, Romania has an amazing network of minority theatres or theatres in minority languages, in addition to, of course, theatres performing in Romanian. And being a speaker of a few languages myself, I felt that I have a kind of unique access to this spread. And that was really the sort of starting point. So I wanted to bring in the voices of the different, if you like, ethnic communities into the conversation here. And in this way, if you like, to some extent, problematize received knowledge in the field and contribute to a kind of more inclusive or decentered approach. And maybe start a debate. So that was important, that I would have representatives, if you like, of the different playwriting traditions and different languages. So in addition to that, because I said that this is a project hailing from my own translation practice, of course, yes, it stems from authors or theatre companies with whom I worked. So there are indeed others I haven't yet discovered, or I must add, I didn't feel that I'm the best person to translate them. So this dual role actually is quite complicated, because there may well be situations where you don't feel necessarily the sort of best suited translator. But I wanted to kind of bring these all together and go back indeed to voices with whom I've collaborated for some time. So we have again Matei Vișniac, on whose work I've written quite extensively and published an anthology. Andras Vișchi, a similar situation. It's a long-term collaboration. But then it was also an ambition, a very overt ambition, to find writing hailing from the German-speaking theatre tradition. And I discovered this adaptation of the Herta Müller text by Mihaela Panainte through a theatre festival connection. And it also seemed ideal because that way we didn't only have text authored by playwrights, if you like, single author dramatic texts, but also adaptations and reformulations or recyclings of pre-existing texts. I also wanted to perhaps acknowledge that theatre making can be collaborative and can be rooted in devising processes. And for this purpose, reaching out to the Jubilee Pen Theatre Company seemed ideal, because of course we are dealing with co-creation and a focus on the experience of the Roma community in Romania. So, and also was a very felicitous meeting with Mihaela Dragan, which was at the back of this. So if you like, kind of personal encounters and kind of political agendas met quite fruitfully in that way. If I have a regret, and I do, and I acknowledge that in my introduction to the book, that I did not manage to include work hailing from the Romanian Jewish theatre tradition, despite it having an amazing history. And that is perhaps something for the future, or when I'm perhaps not focusing quite so much on contemporary relevance, which was an issue and a concern in this case.
But in terms of subversiveness, what do you have to say about the quality of the subversiveness in this plays? In what particular element consists this subversiveness? Maybe aside the Vișniac's play, which, yes, indeed, I know that it was, at least in Timișoara, I discovered that it was played in independent theaters, in a context that it was a piece of resistance, for at least for that community. And I'm sure it was not only for that one. But after that, in democracy, what is subversive about this place?
Well, as you suggested yourself, I suppose they are subversive in different ways, by giving voice, I think, primarily to underrepresented categories. From my point of view, perhaps that is the most important contribution of this anthology to the notion of subversion. So yes, there is in terms of content, but in terms of access, in terms of bringing into the conversation voices, perspectives that perhaps have not been given quite that much attention. With, for example, with the play by Jubilee Pen called Sexodrome, we've got a discussion of the sort of Me Too campaign. We are dealing with the issue of sexual harassment, which all of a sudden sort of became known, but wasn't really something that was overtly discussed prior, perhaps to quite such an extent. Through the Andras Vișchi plays, we are dealing with very strong female protagonists, again, revisiting a history of exclusion from the mainstream and a kind of claiming a space for the articulation of their perspectives. And I feel that that's a very important claim to be made even post-1990, because these are not concerns that sort of disappear with the fall of communism. They remain topical, and I suspect they may be still relevant in the future as well. So I think the bridging this sort of, if you like, totalitarian period when, yes, I suppose there was such a thing as censorship and there was such a thing as silencing certain voices, doesn't mean that all of a sudden everybody has an equal, voice or an equal say. And this is an opportunity to just open up that.
So in this sense, the very act of selection and translation, it's subversive. So you are the most subversive of all these creators of this anthology, right? In a way.
Well, that's very generous. Thank you very much. Well, perhaps not quite, but yes, I suppose I wanted to say that, yes, maybe these voices are important. Yeah, I do believe that that's the case. And there could indeed be other examples in that vein. But yeah, so certainly by selecting them and by sort of showing the variety and the diversity of writing for the stage, I wanted to make a very positive contribution in that sense that, yeah, we have texts. That
I think Miruna is wants to ask you a question.
Yes, I wanted to make, first of all, I wanted to make a very small comment about the subversive dimension of the selection. It maybe doesn't seem very subversive from English speaker or for a public from very far geography from Romania, but from my point of view, the subtlety of the subversion is in the mapping. Or at least one of the dimensions of subversion is the mapping of the selection, because basically in the theater milieu in Romania we are very Romanian language centered. We are not paying enough attention to the plays and to the text written in other languages who are part of our space, who are part of our contemporary natural milieu. Yes, I perfectly understand the fact that Jozefina says that the Yiddish is missing here. Probably, first of all, we have to admit that because we do not have recent plays written in Yiddish, which is sad, at least. But on the other hand, I wanted to move and to ask Ilinca something.
She raised her hand, so it's maybe when she answers, she will answer to you.
I wanted to ask her about also about the inner subversive dimension of presenting your author. Excuse me, I'm not a German speaker, so it's so difficult for me to pronounce his name. The act of subversion, of treating your artist, such a complex artist, as a realist artist. That simple fact that you treat him, yes, I understand the Brechtian proposition and angle of, but the simple fact that you decided to treat him as a realistic artist, which is in a way a very profound choice, in a way a very disturbing perspective, was for me, I don't know, a surprise. Let's say only a surprise. So how did you how did this idea of treating him as a realistic artist came into your mind, first of all?
Well, I'm so happy for this question. It's great when people ask you exactly the questions. They're like, yes, thank you. So I really want to answer this question, but I had something to say while I raised my hand. So if I could say that first about Jozefina's selection of plays, that I think that it's an excellent selection, and there's of course there's the authors are subversive in different ways, and some are more subtle than others, but some are not subtle. At least to me, Anders Visky has a very feminist project there with his like series of like 5 plays. Like it's overtly feminist, and it's reclaiming, I mean, giving a platform to these stories. And then Sexodrome is like Sexodrome, it couldn't be more subversive or more like oppositional in today's culture in Romania, even by the fact that they putting on stage bodies of people who are rejected in our culture, Roma, trans people. So by putting these people on stage, by that fact, it doesn't even matter in the end, like what they say, you know, is the fact that they're there and they exist and they are, and they have a voice, you know, Josefina, as you were saying. I mean, that's incredible. So I'm really happy with the selection of that play. It's
Thank you.
and now, so this question, yeah, that is my like subversive take on Schlingensief, Miruna, as you very nicely put. And I am trying to disturb a little bit the history, the official history of realism in the theater, and the conception of realism. And in fact, it's a very debated and contested history. And I think that we arrived at a particular version of realism today because this other history has been, didn't win, right? So the official history coming from, in the theater, from Ibsen, and then Chekhov, and then Stanislavski, and then Soviet realism, and kitchen sink, and all that American version that they were influenced by these giants, European. Okay, so we know that official history, but in German dramatic theory, there's an alternative history, and it comes with and it's not. Oh, wow. So this official version of realism is very much driven by what we mean. It's realistic decor, natural sounding dialogue, psychological interiority, so putting on stage modern bourgeois life. Okay, and the alternative one, it's all these things are aesthetic, formal aspects of realism. Like Georg Lukács' idea of realism that is very driven by like formal parameters, what it should be. And then there's alternative history that says like, look, realism, and Brecht called himself a realist. He said realism is a very amorphous tradition that is art trying to respond to reality, and that form changes as reality changes. So it's not limited to the form. It's not like a formalistic conception of reality. So if Ibsen did realism like he did, Brecht said, I'm still realism, but my reality has changed. You know, a picture of the Ford factory doesn't say anything about the factory anymore. I'm like paraphrasing Brecht. So, and then Schlingensief, I placed them in that tradition. Like, what is realism today? Meaning, how does theater engage with our reality in an authentic or vital manner? So it's not beholden to the form, it's beholden to the spirit of critique.
Yeah, so if we have to know about him, that he did very different things. He built a reproduction of his childhood church. he established his own political party. He organized a reality show with real immigrants called Please Love Austria, right? And in all this, he was critiquing society and engaging deeply with his cultural and artistic milieu. So I believe in a way, his way of rewriting reality is deeply subversive. What would you say about that?
Yes, he never made like a with something like Please Love Austria. It was critique everywhere. He said he's not original. He said that he's very unoriginal, that he doesn't invent anything. He just takes what's already there and exaggerates it and places the situation, then sees what's happened. Oh, and this thing with unoriginality, it's also in the part of this realistic tradition that it is not about being the creative genius and the creative artist. It's not that. It's just reflecting in a critical manner and exaggerating things, absorbing reality and reflecting it in a way that makes it maybe in a way that you can see what's not okay with it. So he didn't, it's not like he was a realist or like political or engaged because he really verbalized in a coherent, logocentric manner. No, he was very like, no, I am an artist. I don't do like discourse, but like he was doing all these very complicated actions that were received like criticism from all political parties in like in all factions. Yeah. So there was very difficult and some really tacky, and I don't know if they would fly today. Some of them, they can like generally be critiqued also today from being too much or unnecessary or quite rude sometimes, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, so what do we believe in conclusion about the role of the artist in these times? Is its subversiveness still a tool? And I'm talking, of course, about our Western world, because if we open up the conversation to the whole world like we should, sometimes we would not have time enough to address all the nuances or all the aspects of opposing through theater, opposing against injustice in a way, no matter who is the perpetrator of injustice. So what would you say, in your experience, after writing about these subversive artists, what would you say that it's the power of the artist in a society? I know it's a very big question, but we can start. At least start to talk about it.
Well, I suppose that the best thing to say is that they've got the opportunity to observe and to hopefully say something about what they see. And that can be about, of course, different aspects of everyday life or of reality. And in my kind of endeavors, I suppose I'm looking for work that deals with issues of restorative justice in some form or other. Perhaps if you wanted to use a broader umbrella, and it's very hard to be prescriptive and to say what they should be doing. But if they are doing something along these lines, I suppose that is important. And I do not see how this could not remain topical, even looking into the future. In fact, if anything, it become more and more important, because although, the change from, or the fall of communism, just to talk about Romania, happened over 3 decades ago, there are plenty of unresolved issues, aren't there? And in other countries similarly. So I do not see how the need for subversive artists would be lesser now than it has almost ever been. It just, we might have the impression that perhaps things are going well, because arguably, yes, everybody can be part of a conversation, but that doesn't mean that things are really said or listened to, in fact. So I would argue for the necessity of making work that deals with issues of societal and political nature.
Yeah. Actually, I would add something from the afterword of your book, where American actress Melissa Lorraine writes, admiringly about the dedication of Visky Andras and his generation, for which she says theater does not mean merely entertainment. She says, my generation sorely needs a reminder of the value and fragility of our freedom to assemble. In what way do you think our subversive dramaturgy is contributing to that? It's about generations too? Things are seen differently from a generation to another?
That's a great question. What do you think, Ilinca? I mean, in this book that I put together, I that's another thing I didn't say, and thank you for that. Actually, the authors stem from different generations. So we've got, I suppose, the youngest artists are in their 30s and the oldest in their kind of mid to late 60s, which is not the full span, but gives an idea of how these preoccupations actually are not solely generational. But I suppose this point about theatre as entertainment is really important, and I haven't really addressed that in this book, I don't think, but living in London and looking at the sort of theatre offerings day in, day out, of course, I do see that bums on seats is a major preoccupation. And this assumption that people will only see work that's sort of seemingly a sort of light. And I think that's actually a misconception. And often enough, I suppose it's also a matter of labeling and of categorizing things. But I think as long as we see these things in opposition, I think we have a problem, because I think it is possible to explore current concerns and do this in a way that is engaging, that is not off-putting, that's maybe not too cerebral. And I think that's another debate that we could have, or we could invite perhaps our audience here today as well to comment on this. But I think that's a bit of a concern as to what type of theatre would not attract an audience from the off. Why do we assume that? Why do we have to patronize theatre audiences? Why do we assume that they're only there to just relax and buy a drink at the end of it or in the interval? They may actually be there to think about something.
Of course. Ilinca.
Just to go on what Jozefina was saying on the last, I think this is the struggle that we're gonna, today's struggle like that for theater artists is related to this business logic that has taken over theater production, that dictates somehow, who gets funded, who gets a stage, who gets. So I don't see it today, our subversivity. Yes, it's very important what theater you make about, but I think it's going to be increasingly important to fight on how you make it and for whom, to fight against it becoming this elitist or consumerist. So reclaim, finding your public again, a public that is alive in your city, that is relevant. So yeah, and I think that's a larger fight about reclaiming public spaces and reclaiming our cities and reclaiming our buildings and our apartments and our houses from, the world is becoming increasingly unequal, inequalities on the rise. At Aster, that just finished this conference in the state, they were talking a lot about AI and how all of this is changing publics and how scary that is, and it's changing public expectations. So I think we are in troubled times, and not just because, so there isn't one figure, one politician that you fight against. You're fighting against a neoliberal system that has taken over our cities.
In this sense, do you believe that besides their artistic mission, artists have also an activist or / militant role in society? They should, because for a long time after 1989, artists in Romania have kind of avoided affirming themselves as citizens too, in a country where citizenship was not understood, because after 40 years of being banned by a totalitarian regime, nobody knew how to be a citizen anymore. So do we learn how to be citizens by going to theater, among other things?
Yeah, I think we we've been trained so much to act as consumers, most of all, and we forgot how to act collectively as citizens. And I think a vital artistic practice today is gonna try to like recreate this social fabric. And you can call it engage, like political. It doesn't mean that you come with like a political agenda, but you fight against your art just being a monetary value or a product for consumption. But yeah.
What do you
I just
think?
feel that, the conversation has always moved on to my current research project, which is very much about theatre as
which is
and theatre as reclaiming spaces. I'm working on a book about this international theatre company, US-Italian theatre company called Compagnia dei Colombari. Most of their work is actually site-specific. It's created in existing spaces, primarily in Italy, but also internationally. And that's very much a key concern. The artists, but also the audience as citizens, and of engaging with sort of current concerns, mapped historically as well at the same time. So it's very much, if you like, a kind of wake-up call from this consumerist approach to theatre making. They are a non-building based company. They are all over the place and frankly nowhere. They do not have a permanent ensemble, and of course next to no funding, and yet the work is happening. The work is being made through fundraising and all sorts of other kind of collaborative methods here too. And that is unfortunate that this is where indeed the money isn't exactly present, but it's being sought out, and it still happens, just of course not on this industrial scale. It's not in the National Theatre space, it's not in the West End, to bring the conversation back to London, but nonetheless on the fringes. But with the presence and participation of vast number of audiences who sometimes are accidental, who sometimes stumble upon a production and become part of that without having intended to be spectators. And I think that's also very important, to offer this kind of invitation to those who may not normally go to the theatre, to go back to this idea of theatre as an elitist enterprise. So that's also part perhaps of the conversation in some way. But just a last thought, if I may, again about the UK, what I did find recently, and I think it's very successful, how, if you like, okay, it has to be a successful production, but once it goes into the West End, it's actually being seen endlessly by tourists, by people who wouldn't normally seek out a production at, if you like, a more alternative theatre venue, despite the price. Because if the work, let's say, is created in a kind of more avant-garde theatre environment, yes, it tends to attract only a knowing audience. But the moment that it's out there in a commercial theatre space, then it seems to be picked up by those who may not otherwise seek out that work because they frequent that type of theatre environment. So there is something here about the location and the presentation and the context in which theatre is offered up for spectatorship. And I know that we don't quite have this divide in Romania, but this is something I've been witnessing for the last few years. And despite ticket prices going up, these productions attract really, really massive audiences, which I would not have expected to be the case. So I think that's successful, and it's a good thing that it's not just musicals that attract audiences, but you need to make it first in a sort of smaller venue and get good reviews, etc. And then there is a chance of maybe speaking to those who really are up there just, to have a good night out.
Do you think that is this a trend? These kind of productions who are trying to encourage people to assemble, to especially in post-pandemic times. I'm asking that because I recently had a conversation with Florian Malzacher, who wrote The Art of Assembly, a new book trying to cover this new tendency of new companies who are addressing theater in a different way, from the viewpoint of people being together first and then doing something together. And in a way, it's similar with Compagnia de Colombari. I know about their work, and it's interesting that they gather people together and try to make them participate in what's going on. So, what do you think about this new reality?
Well, I don't know if
The assembly.
it's that new, but it is sort of part of this sort of bigger landscape, I suppose, of theatre making. Probably it's not happening on a large scale, but I think it's empowering. It's very important, and it's mutually beneficial, I would say. But it clearly doesn't suit everybody's agenda. I'm not familiar with Maltaker's work on this, and thank you for mentioning this source, because I will check it out to sort of see how exactly they understand it. But certainly with Colombari, they've been making work for 2 decades. Actually, I think the anniversary is going to be next year, and the way they are seeking out venues and the way in which they are, I suppose, making work and you know, building it into the fabric of an existing environment is very important. And it's much more than just ordinary site-specific work, because they sort of tap into the kind of cultural, historical connotations of that space, such as, like, I don't know, the Venice Jewish ghetto, for example, or taking work into prisons or into kind of medieval Italian cities. So it's very much a conversation between the present and the history of the place. So I suppose these kind of resonances between the here and now and the kind of cultural background are super significant.
I mentioned this book because this book, Art of Assembly, because it's interesting that this new, it's not new, of course, this kind of interaction, but it's now joining the stream of more theoretical conversations, which was not the case until now. And among the artists that he mentions, Christoph Schlingensief is one of them. So what do you think about that, Ilinca?
Yeah, I'm familiar with his book a little bit, but I only read what's free online, so so the introduction. So it's very connected to what I was saying before about you know, bringing people together, recreating something among people, where Schlingensief also like did this. This is a longer discussion here too about the value of just bringing people together to just like have fun, which can be very like superficial, or bringing people together in a like uncomfortable situation. So antagonism, like the antagonism of the democratical process, you have to like, you don't get together and like smooth over, you're all different. So when an art piece just like gets people together and everyone is happy, that's not very productive in a way. So also how you get them together. But Schlingensief was how his approach. What I like about him is that, like, look, art is not politics. Like, it's not like we're like, art can never like take that function. Like, we do like something completely different. Whatever we're gonna do is not gonna like solve any of the problems, and it's not our like job to do politics. But what we're professionals of affect and of disturbing some really narratives that are propagated today, such like simplistic and damaging and polarizing. So our job is to shake things up and to maybe create new affects or disturb other affects. So I think that assembly is not like a substitute for functioning political processes. And
we can agree on this.
Oh, like artists are not a substitute for politician or for administration, but what they can do is to demand for action in a way, to sometimes more in a more radical and provocative way, sometimes in a more subtle way. But what he did, as I understand from your book, it's that he was fighting against this destructive sense of political and artistic complacency, right? I mean, he didn't want people to be complacent about things, so that's why his demand for action in very different kind of artistic interventions.
Yeah, and it is. Sorry,
Miruna, you wanted to?
Yeah, I wanted only to. I usually do that. At some point, I feel a very profound need to be the devil's advocate, you know?
Please, do your job.
I would dare to say that Schlingensief, I believe, was first of all, he was a performer. First of all, he was a performer. He made some kind of different, he played different roles by creating different things. But in the end, and this kind of conceptualization and saying, declaring, it's not our job to change the world. Of course it's not. But on the other hand, finishing your life by building an opera in Burkina Faso, it's by default a political gesture. So I felt the need to say it's a way to conceptualize your independence, your freedom as an artist, to say I'm not interested, I'm not making political theater or films or whatever, but basically they all are political statements, creative statements, putting the beggars on platforms and showing them to the world. It's, I don't know, it's strange, it's uncomfortable, it's ethically complex, makes complex ethical demands and debates, and but in fact, I think it's some kind of I'm so sorry. I'm not such an extraordinary English speaker. Just for translate what it's in my mind by a metaphor. It's a very feminine way to say, I know that you are expecting that from me, so I declare I won't do it by doing it, you know. You cannot pretend you are not interested in change, in political change, and making an opera in Burkina Faso related with a school and a hospital in the same time. It's crazy. It's not true, first of all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ilinca, do you have to respond to the devil's advocate, or?
It's funny. He also like Christoph would like do his like rants, these speeches that were like rants, like, look, I am not making political art. What I'm making is very political. Like 5 sentences later, like art doesn't change things. Art 5 sentences later, art has the capacity to like change. So he was like constantly toying with like both these things because they're both simultaneously true. On the one hand, like, yes, we are not politicians. We cannot take the responsibility for like changing everything. And on the other hand, like today as an artist, whatever you do is a political choice, whether you like it or not.
Okay, so we are approaching an hour. I think it's the time to invite everybody here to have join the conversation and I hope you have things to say about that, the role of the artist in a current climate, which is not a very Chris Torch, please. Welcome. Unmute.
So now you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Hi, thank you very much. And also to Cristina for the invitation to be here. I was attracted to the theme that I saw that was subversive dramaturgies. And I would just, I mean, I don't know Schlingensief's work very well at all, so I can't relate directly to that, but there were some words that were used here, among others, realism or reality, which I think are quite two different things. But I was attracted to the idea of subversive dramaturgies because it wasn't about subversive dramatists. It was dramaturgies, narratives that change in some way our life, that undercut our life. And it occurs to me that there's a great difference between political theater, of which I know a great deal myself, having been involved in it, and subversive. Because political theater in a very politicized context is not subversive at all. It's just confirmative, affirmative. Whereas, for example, I don't know, burning a dollar bill in the street in a poor community is a very political action. Doing it on a stage is just a metaphor and in no way subversive, especially in a normal bourgeois theater setting. So I think it's really important what you said earlier about space. It's about where things happen and how they happen and with whom they happen, the participatory. Those are the subversive things today. I'm speaking only about what I see around me in the world, and not just the world of theater. I can give a couple examples of this, just that I think are really important. One of them is Goran Stefanovski, a Macedonian playwright, unfortunately passed away too early recently, 5 years ago. And Goran was most political. His work was always critical, but it was always, like you said, also multiple. You're never really sure, you could never really get a hold of it, which was very subversive to a politicized society, which you took place. You're on the one side, I'm on the other side, and everything is black and white. The person that messes things up is already political, but that's only in the theater. When he started to write scenarios to be created and formed by other directors in different small stories, in unused factory spaces, in large-scale department stores, things that I helped to produce at that time, like Hotel Europa and Euralia. And these were projects that the place they took place and the audience that came to it, submersive meant something completely different. And I think he really came to his own right. The other person I'd like to remember is a colleague, a friend, a common friend of Cristina and I, and that is Ovidio Mihaița from Auleo. I mean, when the large scale projects that I was involved in doing, the Lumina series, you know, it was a fantastic submersive situation in any number of ways. And they run a theater, which is a bar, which is a museum of communist consumption. And he's a playwright, but he writes situations in a completely, it's a whole nother creative, you mentioned before, collective creation. I think collective creation in a world of individualism and consumerism is probably the most subversive thing. So it's the process that's most important, and not some kind of specific content or philosophical concept. I really appreciated listening to all of you into this. I'm not leaving, but and I think this word realism is a bit of a problem, because I think reality and realism are two different things. Mm. Realism is trying to show, like you said, the kitchen sink, Ilinca, but reality is something, I mean, we're very much into reality now, and the theater of happenings, the here and now. You know, this Dario Fo, I remember at a workshop he did many years ago, where he was showing how to use a lithe. And he said, now, if I was a farmer and I went out to the farms and I studied and I watched how they did it, and I learned exactly how they did it. I went on the stage and nobody understood it. It looked ridiculous. It looked false. I had to change it on the stage in order to make it real. And that kind of realism, I think Schlingensief and many of his more conceptual projects are fantastic representations. Thank you. Sorry to
Thank
take
you,
so long.
Chris. No, thank you so much for your comments. I must tell you that there is a strange connection between one of the artists you mentioned, Ovidiu Mihăiță, and one of the plays included by Jozefina in her anthology, which is Ovidiu mentioned that he, as a student, with his fellow students at Tespis, small company, student company, they played Vișniec's play, which was considered very subversive at that point, and they were on the verge of being banned to play because of the subversiveness of Vișniec's play, the spectator that he included in your anthology. So yeah,
Well,
when do you think this was? Sorry to interrupt. Just would be interesting for me to know, when did Ovidiu Mihăiță stage this?
1988, if I am correct. So I don't know if he staged it. He played as an actor in Tespis student company in Timișoara. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I think that Ovidiu and the company Auleo is an excellent example of a here and now theater. What is happening in the room, because they play in a theater for years that has like what, 35 seats, Cristina? I don't know how small it is.
Yes.
And everybody in the room is in the play. You can't get out of it. So they are dealing with it, but they're not doing cabaret. They're not doing stand-up comedy. There's really dramaturgic, but it's always about things that are happening right then, right now in their reality. And that it's kind of punk reality, which I think also, to be honest, Schlingensief represents very well, a kind of German punk reality.
Thank you, Chris. Other comments or questions, please, if you have.
If not, in the meantime, I can, while someone else is thinking. Chris, I appreciate the points you've made. I think you've explained well some things that I was trying to say too, so thank you. And yeah, these words, realism, I think you gave an excellent example. And this word reality, that is a very term, Latin, with like so many philosophical stuff. But I am consciously trying to reclaim it after this like postmodern hyper reality, this like lack of yes, we know how constructed our reality is and how you know, performative and how it's today, blah blah. But I think like hope in reclaiming anything as part of reality has to come with reaffirming that like some sort of reality, while knowing that it is performative, knowing that it is constructed, but it's a shared reality with very concrete impact on very concrete people. And I think realism does that, making like concrete people, concrete impacts in reality on people, puts that again in the fore.
Right. Okay. Thank you for the response. I wish we'd had more artists here tonight, because it would have been enlightening for us to know from their part what they considered to be subversive today, if they are interested in being subversive, because not all artists are, and obviously some of them are more interested in other aspects of performing arts, and not in critiquing and trying to change society. So I'm sorry they are not here to tell us more about that. So we are in our theoretical circle and we're trying to make sense of what they are doing in their practices. Please, if you have some other comments, I can see Olivia Grece is here. She's one of the few artists tonight. So I don't know if she's working with Reactor Theater in Cluj-Napoca, and they are some of the people who are artists who are involved in changing reality in very different way, in various ways. But
Cristina, I can maybe speak briefly about being subversive, because I think when thinking about being subversive, the pragmatic and the practical reality makes this intention quite difficult. And I cannot speak in the name of all my other colleagues at Reactor, but I know for sure that the neoliberalist system and the funding system for independent artists makes it hard or even impossible, as it is at the moment, to really be subversive, because you actually submit and work in the same logic of production that mainstream theaters work with. And it's very hard for me or any artist to push the limits of theater making when you need to work in 5 to 6 weeks. And when the colleagues you're working with also have other jobs. So it's really taking a toll, I think, on creativity. This is what I feel. I do not have a solution, but I think thinking about different modes of producing and making theater and art in general are necessary to overcome this. And of course, this needs to come, I think, in parallel with the new strategies of funding. So I think it's a common discussion that cultural operators and artists and lawmakers and so on need to have. And I think some models are being tested, co-productions between institutions and so on. So I think there are some possibilities out there, but also I think a radical rethinking of the ways in which art is being made is necessary to make theater not subversive but interesting. I think interesting, to say the least. And thank you for the talk tonight. It was great hearing about these artists that I think could inspire us through their practice.
thank you, Olivia, for your comments.
I think that Olivia is pointing out very well that also the production process is part of the subversion, and not just the content. We can say basically in the European context, at least, pretty much what we want to say on stage whenever we want to, whatever we want to, show bodies, show multiple sexual personalities. There is a complete freedom in content, but the subversive is in the production process, how it's done. As a street theater artist many years ago, I was freest when I ever have been, which is the only money I had was the money that I collected in the hat, and that money I used, and nobody was asking me how I used it. Unfortunately, after that, every single step you take in a production process is connected to monetization. And that puts us in a very strong, where what is submersive to a capitalist culture? That's the biggest question. And I think every artist faces it in a very practical way. I think that almost all artists I know have some kind of purpose. And that purpose is their political motivation. Then exactly where that purpose is and where it's expressed depends on what art forms they work with.
Thank you for the comments. Yeah, obviously meaning and purpose should be at the top of the list when an artist starts making art, but sometimes it's lowered to after some other things, which are of course money. Among them are money, of course. So if there are some other comments, Ilinca, you wanted to say something, please?
You know what Olivia was talking about, that is a form of censorship that exists today. Censorship through burnout, and censorship through not allowing artists the time, the mental space to actually do art. Because when you have to like produce like a factory, like one after the other, of course, not like Olivia said, like there's no way that you can like make something subversive. And we have to like wonder, like, is that by design? Does that declaw the subversive potential of art? And it's not like one person evilly plotting, I will not allow these artists like time to do anything. It's systemic. So like, how do you address this? There's no like center to this, no single person. Everyone takes their hand like, that's just how it is. Like, we can't change it. You know, like there's no, and yet it has this very, by design, I would say, this result of neutralizing the critical potential of theater by exhausting the artist.
Yeah, this is very sad what you're saying, and it's very true. And actually, at Reactor, I remember they had a production titled Burnout a couple of years ago, before the pandemic. So they were already in burnout, and they recognized that in a musical. It's true, but it's one of the realities that we are confronted with, and what do? We don't react at all. We are keep on encouraging critical thinking. How do you encourage critical thinking when you are in burnout, or when you are in this kind of situation that mutes you, like we do on Zoom? It's like very, very difficult. So yeah, what more it is to say, to encourage these artists to believe in their power to change things, in their power to encourage critical thinking.
I want to make a comment here. Yet again, I'll be the devil's advocate. I think basically, when we are speaking about the political dimension, we associate it with subversion, because the things we are expressing, not necessarily saying, but expressing, are in a critical position on one hand, related to the mainstream production of commercial theater or commercial whatever. On the other hand, against the way the things are from a strictly political point of view. But on the other hand, here in Romania for 30 years, we were talking, and we are continuing to talk about resistance through culture, in a part producing some kind of a mythology, which, as every mythology, has more or less a part of fake history, you know, making heroes from simple gestures of just pretending to oppose to the communism, when we are talking about resistance culture. Basically, we are now living for 30 years, and the last 10 years more than ever, in a situation in which the real resistance is made through culture. I don't know, the dance center in Bucharest, let's say, it's an example of resistance through culture. Reactor, it's an example to resistance through culture. Building a new audience in Replica in Bucharest, it's a perfect example about resistance through culture. So I would be the partisan of being a little bit bit modest and not to encourage this discussion about arts, the art who, it's a very romantic point of view, and we are centuries distance from romanticism, of art changing the world. Of course, art doesn't change the world, but art is one of the few ways to have a true communication with people, which is much more important, I would dare to say. Of course, making, convincing people to be together and thinking together, and if you can, revelating parts of the reality, they are not realized till the moment of the theatrical meeting, of the theatrical communication. But I think the simple resistance of the theater companies who are who have made their mission by trying to telling what they think it's true. It's subversive by itself.
Yeah, telling the truth, it is subversive in many.
Yeah.
The sheer existence, right? That's what you are saying, Miruna.
Yeah, of course, you can say, everybody can say, yes, but your truth is not my truth. Of course. But just putting yourself in the position not to have a simple pastime, but to tell what you are thinking sincerely, and find people you can communicate with, is a gesture of resistance and of subversion in the same time. So that was my small comment. Small, not so small in me.
Okay. Ilinca?
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, and Miruna and Jozefina was also, Reactor, just by the fact that they're existing, and Aoleo also, by the fact that they're existing is a huge act of resistance, and they're doing a great job. That's not what we're trying to say. Is the point that in a healthy community, they should not just be surviving; they should be thriving. And these companies are not thriving; they're struggling. So they're doing excellent job. But I think how do we get them with this like critical spirit is not something that is like done with like so much effort and so much, but it's something that our civilization culture thinks that it's needed and useful. I mean, I think that's the difference.
But can we really expect that the society, the cultural policy, is made in order to support subversion of itself? I mean, would that be, is that a logical, would we expect that? I think that our Leo's active resistance of survival, as you call it, which I think is true, I don't think they would say that they are suffering. That's not Ovidio's approach to it. It's that this is the way where I am most free to be able to be the artist I want to be. And this is a very important difference than trying, because I don't think that the national theaters in Romania are healthy places. I don't think that they are happy, thriving people. I think they have some money to pay some salaries, too low, with very little work and with a wrong production process, occasionally with some brilliant results anyway, there's no doubt. But I think that, to be honest, I know, and I worked with companies myself where we struggled economically, but where we had wonderful audiences, wonderful responses. We were deeply in connection to our society, and our hearts were thriving while we were doing it. And I think that most submersive artists, I don't think every emerging or not yet successful artists is necessarily submersive. But let's say that in the independent sector, there are many submersive artists. I think they would say that they are quite happy. Not to say that we shouldn't have a cultural policy that should provide them with more money. We should, but I don't think you ask the system to give us money to undercut the system. It works for a while, but in reality, you're never going to get their commitment to that as in terms of a cultural policy.
This is a great point. I suppose it has a creative freedom and how stuff is funded. And I've been recently thinking about it in relation to translation and the funding for translation. There's been some important debates, as you probably know, in Romania about that, about how money is spent on what kind of projects benefit from it. And those who are outside that system indeed have, if you like, that kind of liberty of sort of doing what they really feel right, rather than, I suppose, following certain patterns. There's a certain potential kind of indications, let's put it that way, that may be more likely to get funded. So if we wanted to finish on a positive note, certainly this could be one, in the sense that, yes, creative freedom cannot be tarnished if we are not accepting money from somebody who might have an agenda. And I guess maybe our project sort of come to some extent from that universe, and that's, let's say, a positive thing.
Right. So I believe that one of the conclusions, if we need a conclusion, might be that the most subversive artist is the one that it's free, that stays free in what way or another. Ilinca?
Yeah, I do think it is possible to live in a political organization system that is okay with being criticized. I think that's just maybe we've been used too much with like hierarchical systems of power, but we know that, you know, what's a good leader, or it's some. I think that it is possible, and I think we should think how to make it possible. So if you want to end in a hopeful way, that's that. And second, yes, like today, artists who are not like dependent on this funding to preserve their freedom are, you know, have more freedom. But I don't think it's fair towards these people to demand that in order for you to do art, to just be poor. I don't think that that is like something that is like fair towards. Like,
of course not.
So I think that we need to fight for, you know, a decent life and a functional, non-hierarchical, maybe like what is democracy in the end? Maybe we should like start rethinking like what does that even mean? And yeah.
Yeah, a real democracy should celebrate the artists that are criticizing it, because it helps making it better, right? Or any citizen for that matter.
But it would need to recognize that first, isn't it?
We have to recognize that first. Okay, so thank you, everyone. That was a good conversation. Thank you. We will post it online.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting.
Okay, thank you so much, and see you for some other conversations for Janovics Center. Goodbye.
Please feel invited to other meetings like that, because we'll try to put things together to continue such conversations.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Miruna.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.